This is Cheryl.
This is Catherine.
This is Emma.
And we're the Baronesses.
This podcast is being recorded from various locations in and around Meanjin. We recognise the traditional owners of these lands and pay our respects to all elders past and present. Trigger warning. Listener discretion is advised as this podcast may contain sensitive topics relating to pregnancy loss, grief and trauma.
Welcome back, everyone. And it is the festive season. Woo! What do you guys usually do for Christmas?
Well, for us, we usually end up at a relative's house, and it's usually very much last minute, racing around and trying to figure out who, what, when, where, and whether or not we're traveling interstate or staying locally. But every year is a different option.
Yeah,
How about
can
you,
be
Emma?
stressful sometimes.
Yeah.
Our Christmas is usually spent with extended family, and it's usually planned, a couple of months in advance. But one year, because my husband's family live in another country, and so they're not always able to be together like on the alternate year. And one year he said to me, can we just do our own thing? So that year he and I and our dogs had a beautiful big Christmas lunch at home. I made eggnog. We had bubble baths and we had a really beautiful, like non-traditional Christmas. So that was pretty cool and
That
different
sounds
as well.
lovely.
That
Yeah.
sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we
Yeah.
usually we kind of split our times. We have like a little Christmas at home with my sister and my partner and the cats, of course, and my sister's boyfriend will sometimes come over as well. And then we'll kind of go to my partner's in-laws and so not in-laws, sorry, his relatives and stuff, and do like a sort of a split Christmas. But yeah, I guess like we'll see what happens this year. You never know. Everyone's got all their own plans, so that's usually what we kind of do though. But today we're actually going to be talking about festive grief and interviewing grief coach Judi Johnson of Embrace Your Future. Here's the interview. Enjoy.
Okay, so welcome, Judi. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes,
Thank
welcome.
Thank
Welcome,
you for
Judi.
today.
Okay, so
How are you
Judi,
today?
I'm absolutely fantastic today. How are all of
That's
you?
good. Yes, we're good. Yeah.
Really
doing
good, thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe we should just jump straight into it. So today
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about festive grief. So looking at how grief can affect us, especially around Christmas or other festivities. Judi, what can you tell us about what you do and how you came to being a grief coach?
Yeah, so I think that I was very late to the party in really understanding how much grief impacts our life, where we get grief from, how it accumulates, um, until I guess it really got hold of me and gave me a really good kicking. And, when you're in that situation, you don't know where to go with it, you don't know what's going on. So I had a real long journey through grief from many, many causes, relationships, chronic ill health, being childless not by choice, a whole plethora of reasons that led to a real deep-seated grief. And so I hit the bottom quite hard. And I went through the typical, everything was negative. I was angry. I was bitter. I was envious. I'm sure a lot of this resonates with you, ladies.
It sure does, yeah. I was just thinking that. You sound like us.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And, let's face it, what we experience with grief, although our journeys are all different, we experience a lot of things that are very familiar to each other. And so I had to sort of find a way through and out the other side of my grief. And it took me a long time to get to that point because I simply hadn't identified how far down I dropped, and then one day you realize that you don't see anything good in your life and everything is just such a negative and you can't see what your future's going to look like, and any future that you can see really doesn't look like a future that you want to live. And that's especially a feature of being CNBC, I think. And so I started looking at ways that I could improve how I felt. And I stumbled across Jodi Day's book, Living the Life Unexpected. I'm sure you've all seen and read that.
Yes, we have. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't say I ever got to the end of it. I did bits of it and thought, oh, that's enough now, and did a bit more, and that was enough, and and got sort of 2/3 of the way through. But on that journey, I came across a podcast, and I'd never been a listener of podcasts. And it was from a lady who trained as a counsellor and very quickly got into working with people that were anorexic and bulimic, etc. And whilst those subjects weren't necessarily something that I was relating to, I related to how much she wanted to help people. And I thought, good God, that really resonates with me. I really would love to help other people. And so I thought, how can I do this? So I started investigating that. And I settled on I was going to train as a coach. And so when I started training as a coach, I had the option to pick the angle that I went in with it. And I picked CNBC. So every bit of study, every assignment I did, I angled towards a potential CNBC client.
Do you, oh, sorry, keep
No,
going.
you go.
I was just going to ask you, so as someone who's kind of in that pool, have you found clients hard to come by? So I feel like sometimes the CNBC community is a little bit hidden. So I guess my question is, yeah, how have you managed to find your people? How do they find you?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Um, I think in what we would consider to be mainstream grief, i.e., bereavement, is what most people think of causing grief, although there are obviously many other causes. Um, it's quite a clear-cut grief. You've lost somebody that you loved. You may have lost a future with that if it was a partner or somebody that you did a huge amount with in your life. But it's very clear what has happened, what you've lost. The ambiguous grief, the disenfranchised grief of being CNBC, people don't want to go to that future that they didn't imagine in the first place. It's a future they never wanted. And to say to somebody, when you journey from that deep hurt that you are in now to your reimagined future, it's going to be that future that you didn't want, but hey, you're going to have to suck that up, is
Yeah.
a real tough thing, really tough. And so what I tend to see is that people stay in that place of hurt for a very, very long time compared to somebody who has mainstream, if we're going to call it that for the sake of making it obvious what we're referring to. People find it very difficult to make that decision, make that change, take that tiny, tiny step towards that future, because who wants a future that doesn't have in it what you always wanted?
Do you think that's
Yeah.
because there's no understanding of that type of grief in like for other people who haven't been through it?
I think that there's many facets to it. I think that, I mean, one of the things about grief is that we accumulate grief from preschool. And we don't identify it as that. Of course, we don't. We're way too young. But all through our life, we're accumulating grief from events that change our lens, our perspective on our life, our future. And when we have a major grief event, such as being CNBC, It's so multifaceted that all of those previous events come up, and it's like a load of train cars shunting together. And suddenly that grief is so deep that all of those things, they become a problem as well. So when I start to work with people, not only are we working on the CNBC grief, we have to go back years and we have to deal with all of those previous life events that have accumulated or influenced that CNBC. So the journey is massive. It's very long, it's very complicated,
Yeah.
and it's really difficult for people because it's like treading through a minefield on tiptoes and every so often ducking when there's an explosion, you know.
Mm.
It really is. It's such a tough journey.
I was just thinking while you were talking, do you think, this may sound like a silly question, but do you think age has anything to do with people being ready to let it go and move on? Or do you think it's people just get tired of feeling that way all the time and so then they're ready to let it go and move on? I was just thinking this week, for me, I'm like, okay, so it's been about 18 years, this journey for me. So, and I'm ready to put that behind me. I think that's long enough. But from your experience, what would you say?
I don't think that there's a formula to it, and I think that's simply because every one of us is so unique, and some
Yeah.
people's tolerance is way stronger than others. Some people are only focused on one goal and they will follow that goal until there is no hope. Some people evaluate differently and will say, right, I've tried A, B, C, X, Y, Z, none of them worked, we'll draw a line. So I don't think that there's any way that we could say that that was the case. And, you know, I hear of people going into menopause and still hoping for that miracle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah.
Um, so seeing as we're in the festive season, I'd ask you
Mhm.
a festive season question. Um, so what is festive grief in your opinion? How would you define that? And why do you think that childless people can get so easily triggered during the festive season, whether it be Christmas or other seasonal hallmark religious or cultural events and holidays throughout the year?
Yeah. I think often when we picture family life, we anticipate what that would look like, and we picture a perfect family, you know, clean children in perfect outfits, sunny days, happy times, you know, and commonly the excitement around Christmas is part of a picture that we create.
Mm.
And perhaps the longer we are on that journey of trying to have a family, the more that picture gets rosier and more perfected. We forget many families fall out at Christmas. We forget how many people dread going to their in-laws or,
Yeah.
you know, going and, you know, this not so much in Australia and New Zealand where we perhaps have better weather, but, you know, in places like the UK when it's all sitting indoors and eating and, you know, old rellies falling asleep on the sofa, you know, actually
Yeah.
we look forward to something that we don't always enjoy, do we? You know,
Mm.
and so I think we imagine those excited children on Christmas morning. They're ripping open their presents, they're squealing with delight, they're playing happily all day. We don't actually picture the squabbles over a toy, the kids being high on sugar, being overtired and trying to calm them down. We don't look at any of those things, those big tantrums that happen, and we think, good grief, God, would Christmas just please end, you know?
Yeah.
Have that. We picture all of that perfection, you know, and we don't picture that rush up to Christmas where we're exhausted with planning and purchasing presents and the financial stresses of that kid wanting an iPad and that one wanting a MacBook and that one wanting a fancy bike and all of those sorts of things, you know. And when it comes to birthdays become centered around young children. Even
Yeah.
when you're an adult, you might have a 40th birthday, but you're going to have a bouncy castle for the kids because your kids are young. So the birthday becomes about those kids. So we lose this focus when we don't have children. We picture this perfection. We don't picture what those events actually are. If it's Easter, you've got to go and put the Easter eggs out and do the Easter egg hunt. The focus is on the kids. And then you've got to time the lunch around the kids and the present opening and all of those sorts of things. And so we have this glorified, rosy view of what Christmas would be like if we had children. And the reality is probably far adrift from what we picture. Um, and so it becomes such a big, intimidating picture to us that we then have that envy of everybody else who's got all the kids at Christmas that we don't want, who has all the excitement that we think we want. Um, and of a perfect world.
So
You're so right. Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, I know I certainly romanticized the whole thing, but
yeah.
thanks for pointing all that out for me because, maybe my life's pretty good.
There you have it, you see. And, when you have something validated for you, it becomes a lot more acceptable quite often, doesn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, Cheryl, I interrupted
That's
you.
all good. Yes, I was just gonna say, like, I guess it's just that we kind of idealize that alternate future rather than really looking at the reality. So you're kind of saying that that's basically where the grief is coming in. We're just over idealizing something that never happened.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
sometimes we're picturing things that actually would never happen. You know,
yeah,
it's almost like picturing that lottery win, it's
yeah,
6 million, I would buy that house, that car type of thing. And that's what we're doing with Christmas. We imagine that we'd have bought this massive pile of presents and we wouldn't have got stressed wrapping them all up and thinking, oh my God, I've run out of paper and, will that child like that? And,
yeah.
we don't picture any of the negatives. We only picture the positives. We
Mm,
don't evaluate.
Mm,
true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess with that too, do you think that culture plays into that a lot?
Yeah, I mean, most cultures focus on the family, don't
Mm,
they? It's all about that unit, and that puts a huge amount of pressure on people. And in some cultures, people without children are almost seen as sort of second class, aren't they? Your wealth is your children. And, unfortunately, quite often it's male children as well,
yes. Yeah.
which has its own issues in a completely different direction that we obviously don't want to go down. But yeah, for certain, a lot of families, the emphasis is so much on children.
Yeah.
Mm. And so, how do you feel that family and friends can be more inclusive of their childless or child-free loved ones?
Well, how would you ever get family and friends to actually acknowledge this? This is one of the biggest bugbears for people is that family and friends do not understand what they're going through, where they're coming from, how left out they feel. If you do have family and friends who are prepared to discuss this and listen, I think one of the things that we all want to do is to just have a conversation with somebody that's about general life and not about their children. Everybody who has a child was a person before they had a child. They had a rounded personality, they had interests. And suddenly, when they have children, this isn't parent bashing at all, but quite often when their children are younger, their focus tends to be on their children. And that's when people that are CNBC often feel so left out of the conversation. They can't join in about whether your child naps for 40 minutes or 43, or
Yeah.
whether they said their first words or whether they walked at 11 months and 3 days or 11 months and 6 days. There's a lot of parent competing goes on,
Yeah.
especially with all the apps that relate to how you bring your children up. And so that becomes a massive focus. And so you're on the sidelines of a conversation. So I think people with children, if they could just make time to speak to us about normal life without a child interrupting, maybe have adults and children's meal times at Christmas so that the children aren't over hungry and fractious. Feed them, let them go and play with their toys, and the adults sit down and have an adult's meal, which would then
Hmm.
take that focus off the children, because the children, when they're starving, will be demanding attention.
Yeah.
And then the adults can sit and chat comfortably.
That's a
Perhaps,
great idea.
Yeah, that really
yeah,
is.
Yeah.
or perhaps you have a celebration on a different day that isn't so child
Mm.
focused. You have the adult celebration the weekend before or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
and make that special.
Mm.
Yeah, I guess I love those suggestions. Almost like we're asking people to be people first and parents second, maybe. I don't know if that's a big ask, but that's kind of what I
Mm,
was hearing is like, I'm a person, you're a person. Let's talk about what's important to us, what's going on for us right now. I guess we're looking for that meaningful connection.
mm. And children
Yeah.
don't define us,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because we were all a person. Every single person in this world was a person in their own right before they had one or
Absolutely.
more children.
Yeah.
And it would be a shame to lose who that person is.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yep. I
Absolutely.
love that. So, a curly question next. Um, what should a
Yeah.
childless or infertile person do if a family member announces pregnancy over Christmas lunch?
I mean, I think we should always be prepared for such an announcement whenever it might be made, as it's common to make an announcement like that where it's going to have the most impact and excitement. And saving that for the glory on Christmas Day, is like sort of game, set, and match, isn't it, really? So I think that we always need to be prepared how we're going to respond, because you'll be out to dinner and somebody will do that, or you'll be at a birthday party and somebody will do that, or at a wedding. So it's always going to come in at us from left field, and if we're not prepared for it, it's not going to look good. And one of the worst things about that is if we react in an adverse way, we're going to be the one that ruined the party. We're going to be the
Hmm.
one that upstaged the person that was making the announcement by getting up and running away from the table. So, one of the things that I recommend to my clients when they have an overwhelming emotion, and this is an injustice circumstances, that they have a treasure in their pocket. It might be the most beautiful pebble they picked up off a beach on a lovely walk one day, or a nice shell, or it might be a little jade Buddha or some treasure that they adore, and they have it in their pocket. And when those emotions come and threaten to overwhelm, you pop your hand in your pocket and you run your thumb over the ridges of the shell, or over that smooth surface of the stone, or over the Buddha's belly, and it will calm you. It will just lessen those emotions. Always having some breathing exercises that you can call on. Nobody can see you doing it really, but if you do square breathing, and anyone can look that up online, it's a very simple technique. You can do it if you're stuck in a lift, you can do it in any difficult circumstance. That's a good thing to do. But in the end, if you're anticipating that that announcement is going to be made and you can't cope with it, don't go. Don't put
Yeah.
yourself in a situation that is going to be so painful for you. At some stage in the future, you will be able to manage those announcements. But if at the moment that is going to be that painful to you, no is a full sentence when you don't want to go and do something. And you can find a reason not to go, and to go and be kind to yourself. Self-care is the ultimate that we need to practice if we are feeling that vulnerable.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's good because it's good for people to be aware of that because I think we feel guilty sometimes. So it's really nice to have that permission, to say it's okay. It's okay to take care of you in
Mm,
those tricky situations. So,
mm. And it's
Yeah.
okay not to be okay. Let's
Mm.
face it, it is.
Yeah. And
yeah.
I guess this kind of flows on to, sometimes you've got the pushy aunt. They may not know that you are unable to have kids, and they keep asking you, when are you having kids? So I guess how would you suggest people respond to those like intrusive questions, especially if they don't necessarily feel able to confide and say that I can't have kids or I'm going through infertility? How would you suggest that people kind of manage that?
I think this is another one where you always need to have an answer prepared for
Mm.
this circumstance, because it's going to happen over Christmas lunch. It's going to happen while you're in a queue for the train. It's going to happen anywhere. It's
Mm.
happened to me in a supermarket. So you've got to be prepared for that. And I think if you having an answer for those people that you know, and maybe for those people that you don't know, so you've got an answer each way. I think the most important thing is to be comfortable with the answers that you have. If
Mm.
you're a bold and blunt person, you might then say to them, remind me to ask you about your sex life when I've responded about mine. If you're bold, you might say that. If that sits well with you,
Yeah.
do that. But if you're less bold, you might settle with something like, do you know, I find that question rather personal. And then
Mm.
I would just then, if I said to somebody, well, I find that question rather personal, but anyway, just tell me, what was that holiday like you've just been on?
Oh, yep. Change the
Just
topic.
deflect
Yeah.
that question. Just it's making it very obvious that you don't want to talk about it, but you're not going to be rude about it just as effectively they were to you. You're going to show some interest in them. And I think, God, that's a double whammy for somebody, really, because you've shut them down and then you've shown interest in who they are as a person. And
Mm.
all they showed interest in was whether you could reproduce or not.
Yeah.
Mm.
No, that's a good
Yeah.
suggestion. Yes. All right. So for people like me, I Christmas used to be my favorite holiday. I used to really, really love Christmas, but especially since becoming childless, not by choice, Christmas has been really, really hard. It's sort of like sucked all the joy out of it for me. So what would you suggest for people like me to sort of bring back the joy that they once felt for Christmas?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we do, or are inclined to do when we're CNBC, and in other areas of griefs as well, but especially in CNBC, is be so inward focused. And one of the things that helps us on our journey is to develop an outward focus. So in answer to your question, I think one of the things we need to do is stop focusing on what we can't have and
Mm.
focus on what we can have. That may sound trite, but living in envy never made anybody happy,
Mm.
you know.
So true. Yeah.
Yeah. So making your own traditions,
Mm.
you know. Christmas isn't any longer that religious holiday that it was in times gone by,
Yeah.
where we did midnight mass and we did, all of those things. Christmas is what we make of it.
Mm.
It's what we decide it is. And so it can be anything that you want within your capabilities, and that's physical, financial, time, whatever. Have your own fun. Find the child within yourself again. Because one of the other things that we really lose when we're CNBC is all of those things that we did. We become very compact. We lose a lot of those things that we enjoyed, that gave us joy, and we just can't find them. We forget where they are, and we have
Yeah.
to go back and find them. We forget often how to laugh. And if we can remember why we were with our partner in the first place, because often we forget that, don't we? Yeah, exactly. I hear you. And so, go and find those things that are fun. I mean, we have a Christmas tradition at home now. We ditched the green tree, you
Oh,
know.
nice. Yep.
Mm.
Okay.
That is the obvious thing we all have at Christmas. So I have these really funky, very modern, flat against the wall white trees that are just all little tiny lights, and they are spectacular. And I have a pair either side of
Mm.
the fireplace. And at the start of December every year, I get the box of ornaments out, and they are things I've collected from all around the world.
Oh,
That's what
cool.
they
Yeah.
are. They
Mm.
are
Yeah.
decorations from, Mexico and Hong Kong and Borneo and wherever else. And they come out of the box, unwrapped one at a time. And I look at them and I look at that one, and of course, the memories come flooding back of that
Mm.
trip. And then I find a place on the tray. And then when that one's done, I'll get another one out and I'll look at that, and a load more memories come back in. So, because I associate great memories with that, it's a happy process in decorating the tray. It isn't oh, well, I should have children to put the fairy on the top, or,
Mm.
this is such an empty activity because it should involve children. There is no child link to that tradition of mine. So it could
Mm.
take a week to get all of those ornaments on the tray as I reminisce putting them up. And then obviously it's quicker when I take it down a month or so later. But of course, other memories come in when I take those ornaments off. So it's a positive activity. And we can all find a positive tradition that we could develop for ourselves that takes it away from a child association.
I love
That's a
that.
good,
That's like
yeah,
yeah, it's a
great
beautiful
idea.
little
Yeah.
ritual almost, isn't it?
Mm.
And it makes me think like we can start this year. Like if that's not
Yes.
something that you're doing already, like we can start this year. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that one.
Yes. That's great. Yeah, I love that. It's like making your own little traditions and just
Mm.
focusing on your little family, however that family looks.
Mm. Absolutely.
So, what should people do if they are the only family member without kids and their family leaves them out of the family activities for the festive season?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we do as humans is we rely on other people for our happiness, and happiness comes from within us. And we have to remember that we can't influence what other people think, what they do, what
Mm.
their opinions are. The only people that we can control that with is ourselves. So if we feel comfortable, we could gently question a decision if we're not involved. But in the end, if we end up with a head to head, it's likely only to cause some upset.
Mm.
And if we're already feeling adrift in that family dynamic, that's not going to help matters.
Mm.
So I think we need to take a step back, take responsibility for our own happiness, and remember what brings us joy. And, that can help in formulating an alternative plan for us.
Mm. I
Yeah.
guess this would also kind of sometimes bring up old family trauma unrelated to
Yeah.
childlessness. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
this is what I hear from people as well quite a lot is, oh, well, I'm the one in the family that's always been blamed for X, Y, and Z. And a lot of families do have a scapegoat. That's not that person just imagining that they're the punch bag, but some families do have that. And so if we stick our head above the parapet and say, whoa, that's not fair, if that's the family dynamic, it's not going to heal anything at all. Sometimes we're better stepping back and saying, okay, that's how it is. I will do something that makes me happy because actually, when I'm in that family environment, I'm not always happy anyway.
Yeah, so it's almost
Mm.
like encouraging people to put those boundaries up with their own family sometimes as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If your family hurt you every time you see them,
Mm.
why go back for that hurt? Control
Yeah.
yourself, your exposure to that hurt.
Mm. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. I'm just looking. I had a few more things that I wanted to ask you, but I think you have addressed a lot of them already. I wanted to ask you, I think again though, yes, I'm someone who I did that every year, like, oh, next year there'll be a baby, next year there'll be a baby, next year that was me. I did that for so many years. Um, and so each Christmas I'd have that sadness, or the emptiness. I don't know. Have you got anything to say about that for people who might be experiencing that this year?
Yeah, I mean, what I tend to do, other as well as making my own traditions, is I plan Christmas well in advance. We can
Hmm.
often sit there thinking, right, okay, who's going to invite me if you don't have the alternate in-laws out, whatever,
Hmm.
every Christmas. So if we plan in advance, and I always start thinking about Christmas in July because
Hmm.
then I know way in advance what I'm going to do and I can start working towards that so it's not a surprise. If we wait till November and we haven't been asked to anybody's for Christmas, what are you then going to do? Because they probably have all made their own plans. So we're going to feel doubly hurt. Oh my God, nobody's invited me. It's November. I'm trying to invite people, nobody's available, or whatever. So make your plans well in advance. Think about those people who might be good friends in a similar situation to you. Get together and do some good stuff with them.
Yeah, so like have a
Yeah.
Christmas with your fellow childless and child-free friends, maybe, and just
We
like come
did that
together as
for
like a little found family.
Yeah, we've done that
Yeah.
for years. And I mean, we have had some absolute screams at Christmas, where the guys have had sort of machine gun Nerf guns, and we've had targets in the garden. And, you can imagine by about 4 in the afternoon when a number of drinks had been drunk, how riotous that gets. And we've had the kids next door want to come and play with us because we're having way more fun than they are.
Yeah.
And we have had the most fantastic Christmases just by having friends over because there's no politics, there's
Yeah.
no
Mm.
expectation. Um, it's relaxed. Nobody has a tantrum when you have friends over.
Mm.
Everyone behaves themselves and gets involved and yeah. So I think doing that or just up sticks. And this year we're going to Singapore for Christmas and Vietnam for
Oh,
New Year.
lovely.
And it's completely different,
Yeah.
but it's going to be super exciting. So I'm so excited to go and do that. We've been skiing for Christmas, been at the top of a mountain on Christmas Day. We've done all sorts of things. We've done great walks in New Zealand, staying in lodges and that sort of stuff. And it's finding something that's different, that feels fulfilling, that
Yeah.
excites you, that other people probably can't do because they've got kids, because they're
Yeah.
not going to
Mm.
want to go on the Great Walk. Do you
Mm.
want to drag your child around Vietnam? Mm,
Mm.
It's
probably
true.
not. So what can you do with your time that
Mm.
really fires you up? What are you going to be passionate about doing?
And I guess it also, some people could probably volunteer on Christmas Day because there's lots of people in like homeless shelters or, who don't have family or anyone out there for them, and you can be their person on that day.
You can
Mm.
do that. And, we've done it as well, where in our earlier days in New Zealand, when we knew a few people that weren't going to be seeing anybody else at Christmas. So we would have friends around in the day, and in the evening, we'd say all of those people who would otherwise be on their own will all come round to us then.
Yeah.
And seeing other people get joy through connection is
Mm.
great. It's
Yeah,
fulfilling.
and that's the spirit of Christmas, isn't it? Like,
Mm.
connecting with other people.
Right,
Mm.
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
And don't be sitting there at the time when everyone's opening their presents thinking, twiddle my thumbs, right, what am I going to do now? Get out there, have a game of pickleball, or,
Mm.
Mm.
go
Mm.
for a beautiful walk, or go and make yourself a breakfast picnic and eat it on the beach or something. Do something special. Don't wait for the festivities to find you. You go make them.
Mm.
Yeah, we can make our festive season whatever we want it to be. Like we can think bigger. We can think outside of the tradition. We don't need to be limited by what everybody else is doing. I love
Mm.
that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Judy.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I think what are your hot tips to get through the festive season, Judy?
Yeah, if you were to like narrow it down to like a handful maybe.
I think the main things are think about it in advance. Where do you want to be? Instead of just taking that invite and turning up, is that what you want? You've got a
Mm.
choice here. So decide what you want. And if you think that you're going to turn up somewhere where you're going to be bombarded with those questions that really you don't fancy answering at the moment, then make other plans. You don't have to apologize. You might have a parent who says to you, but you always come to us. Why aren't you coming to us? You're not responsible for their happiness, just as they're not responsible for yours. So
Mm.
you can just say, well, we're going to do something different this year. And then this is the year to start making it what you want to make it, to stop having those Christmases that were mediocre, but you do them anyway.
Mm.
Start making this the festive season and build on it every year and make it the perfect formula
Mm.
for your happy Christmas.
And I suppose if someone is particularly like surrounded by young children at the Christmas table, sometimes they might say, as a compromise, I'll bring over the kids' presents, my nieces and nephews' presents beforehand, and then I'm not going to be at the Christmas table though. So you guys enjoy yourselves. I've given the kids presents. Thank you. And then duck out just respectfully. Is that like a good strategy if, like, for example, someone doesn't really want to be around the babies and the toddlers,
Hmm.
especially if they're fresh out of the grief?
Yeah, absolutely. Or find that way that you can pop in for that pre-lunch drink, but actually you're not going to be able to stay for the whole meal,
Yeah.
and be the one that turns up with a beautiful bottle of champagne and pours everyone a glass, drinks it, and then says, that was beautiful. I'm off to whatever it is you're going to do next.
Yeah.
That boundary says you will do what you're comfortable in
Mm.
doing, not what other people want or expect you to do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fair. All right. Well, I think that's all we have today for our listeners. Judy, how can our listeners reach you?
Okay, so my coaching business is Embrace Your Future. So it's embraceyourfuture.net. And they can also find me on my Facebook group, CNBC Grief, and CNBC Coaching. And on those groups, they will find some tips and some advice and just some information that, if you piece it together, can help you come out the other side. And if anyone wants to sign up for my Kickstart Your Future program, the details are on my website.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We'll also leave links in our show notes for anyone that's interested to see Judy's website or her Facebook pages. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
That was such a great episode with Judi. What did you guys think?
I loved it. I actually took so many notes here, so many good tips. What do
Yeah.
you think, Catherine?
Oh yeah, I thought it was great, and especially what Judy was saying about, perhaps making your own traditions or non-traditional
Yes.
traditions that work for you. And I think that's a really great idea. So I can really see how I could be cooking up a storm and just leaving the door open with a open invitation.
Oh yeah, we'll be there. Yeah, no, I really love
Sounds
that.
nice.
Like making your own traditions. It sounds so wholesome and it's like such a nice way to celebrate. But yeah, this is our last episode for the year. Can you guys believe it?
I
Oh
can't
my
believe it.
gosh, we have crammed so much into the year. So many great
Yeah.
topics.
Yeah, it's been pretty good. Like I've really been enjoying doing the podcast with you guys. It's
Yeah.
been awesome. So we hope you all have an amazing festive season, however you celebrate. In the meantime, make sure you leave a review on your preferred podcast streaming channel and stay kind. That includes self-kindness too.